Last Saturday, as I mentioned, former President Donald Trump told an audience of conservative Christians that our republic depends on Christians continuing to leave the sidelines to participate in our republic. Speaking at the Faith and Freedom Coalition's annual Road to the Majority Conference in Washington, right here, former President Trump noted that many Christians do not vote and urged those attending to encourage Christian friends and neighbors to head to the polls in November. Now, given the Biden administration's pattern of targeting Christians, from the FBI investigating Catholic churches to raiding the homes of pro-life activists, will we see engaged conservative Christians responding by voting this fall? Joining me now to discuss this, Dr. Ralph Reed, founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, which organized the Road to Majority Conference. Ralph, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tony. Always good to be with you.
So that's music to your ears, engagement of Christians. That's what you've spent most of your adult life, educating and engaging Christians. What's your sense, based upon what you saw this weekend and how folks responded to former President Trump?
I think, Tony, we're going to see a massive turnout of evangelical and pro-life Christians. Donald Trump is a turnout machine, frankly, to some extent on both sides of the ball. But if you go back to 2016, evangelicals were 26% of the electorate, and they voted 81% for Donald Trump. That was the highest share ever recorded by a Republican nominee for president since exit polling began. And in 2020, they increased to 27% of the electorate, and they voted 84% for Donald Trump. So he gained about 2 points on the national ballot. And the raw number of evangelical votes that he got, Tony, was even more impressive. He went from about 25 million evangelical votes to north of 36 million, gained about 11 million net votes from evangelicals. I'm not a prophet. I can't predict what the turnout will be in November, but it would not surprise me if it was north of that number.
Of course, that was driven by the policies of the Trump administration, 4 years of pro-family policies, pro-life policies. I mean, I'm not taking away from any of the others, although I'm not hesitant to do so. He was one of the few who followed through on promises that he made to evangelical voters, was he not?
Tony, I think if anything, that's an understatement. I mean, you couldn't be more right, but I want you to think, your audience to think about this for a minute. He was the first nominee of a major political party with a vacancy on the Supreme Court on Election Day that released a list of names of jurists and said, I promise to pick a Supreme Court justice from this list and any subsequent vacancy from that list. Tony, that had never happened before in American history.
Right.
And he not only did it once, he did it twice, he did it 3 times. And I remember, Tony, when he made that promise, there was a Christian blogger, I won't mention his name, he's a good friend of yours and mine, and he said, if his wives couldn't trust him, neither can the voters. The argument was, we can't believe what he says. But to your point, he not only kept that promise, he kept the promise to move the embassy of the U.S. government from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He kept a promise to defund Planned Parenthood. And then he started keeping promises he never made, like being the first president to ever address the March for Life in person. So you're right. There was no more doubt, no more skepticism, no more mistrust. And I don't think at least I hope there won't be this time.
I want to go back to 2016. In some ways, it's somewhat similar to 2016. We've had a lot of things happen in the 4 years since President Trump left office. But you mentioned there were 3 things I thought were pivotal in 2016 that galvanized evangelical support. And you mentioned the one, releasing of a letter of the list of pro-life nominees that he would make to the courts. We just asked that he do that. He listed he released a list. He picked a known conservative running mate with a record, and then he embraced the most conservative party platform in the party's history. Those three things, I think, galvanized support. Do we need a repeat of that?
I think we absolutely need a repeat. I think we're at an inflection point in this campaign, Tony, and in many ways, the foundation for the fall is going to be laid in the next 3 weeks. We have a debate taking place here in Atlanta, where I live and where I'm joining you from tonight, in about 48 hours. And how well the president does, meaning former President Trump, and how well Biden does is going to determine a lot. It'll be a key moment. The second is the selection of his vice presidential running mate. And the third will be the gathering in Milwaukee and the adoption of the platform. And I've said repeatedly, I don't want to speak for you, but I know that you've said similar things, that if the Republican Party and the Trump campaign send a message of equivocation or retreat on the historic defense of innocent human life by the Republican Party, I believe, Tony, the most important position of this party, other than its opposition to slavery, it will make it harder to turn these voters out in the fall.
I think you're right. Dr. Reed, we got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us today. Always great to see you.